He fired his maid for touching his fridge, but when he discovered the real reason, he broke down in tears. The sound of the refrigerator door clicking open echoed louder than it should have in the silent marble-floored mansion. It was a small, almost invisible act, one that should have meant nothing. But for Adrian Voss it meant betrayal, and within minutes it would change 2 lives forever. Before we dive deeper into this emotional story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden struggles people carry, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Adrian Voss was a man who had everything the world could offer: wealth, power, influence, and a reputation that inspired both awe and fear. His mansion stood like a fortress on the outskirts of the city, cold and untouchable, much like the man himself. People admired his success, but no one truly knew him. His life had been shaped by discipline, loss, and a relentless desire for control. Every item in his home had a place. Every rule was followed. Every boundary was respected, especially by the staff. Among those staff members was Maya, a quiet woman in her early 30s who had been working there for just over 3 months. She was efficient, respectful, and almost invisible in her presence. She never spoke unless spoken to, never lingered, never made mistakes. To Adrian, she was just another employee, replaceable, unimportant, a name on payroll. That afternoon, Adrian had returned home unexpectedly. A canceled meeting had given him rare free time, and he walked into his house earlier than usual. The silence greeted him as always, but something felt off. A faint movement in the kitchen caught his eye, and then he saw it. Maya, standing in front of the refrigerator, the door open, her hand hovering near the shelves. For a moment, time froze. To anyone else it would have seemed harmless, but to Adrian it was a violation. His rules were clear. Staff were not to touch personal food items. It wasn't about the food, it was about boundaries, about respect. His face hardened instantly, and anger surged through him like a storm breaking loose. Without waiting for an explanation, without asking a single question, he made his decision. His voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air like glass. Maya flinched, stepping back, her face pale. She tried to speak, her lips trembling as if she wanted to explain, but Adrian had already turned away emotionally. In his mind, the verdict was final. By evening, she was gone. The house returned to its usual silence, but something had shifted. Adrian sat in his study that night, staring at his reflection in the dark window. He felt justified. Rules were rules. Discipline was necessary. That was how he had built everything he owned. There was no room for exceptions. But sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, Adrian walked into the kitchen, expecting everything to be as perfect as always. But instead, he noticed something strange. A small folded piece of paper lay on the counter near the refrigerator. It hadn't been there before. He frowned, picking it up slowly. The handwriting was simple, slightly shaky. It was from Maya. As he read the note, something inside him began to crack. She had written that she was sorry, not for breaking a rule, but for leaving without properly explaining. She said she knew she had no right to open the fridge, but she had done it out of desperation. Her young son had been sick for days, and she hadn't been able to afford proper food or medicine. That morning, she had skipped her own meal again, and the dizziness had become too much. She had only opened the fridge to take a small piece of bread, nothing more. But then came the line that changed everything. She had written that she never took anything. She just stood there, gathering the courage to ask, but fear stopped her. Fear of losing the only job she had left. Adrian's hand trembled slightly as he lowered the note. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Guilt. Memories he had buried long ago began to resurface. A small apartment, empty cupboards, a younger version of himself, hungry, desperate, and invisible to the world. There was a time when he too had stood in front of something he couldn't have, wishing for just one chance, one act of kindness. But unlike Maya, he had chosen a different path, a harder one that had slowly stripped away his empathy and replaced it with control. He looked around his massive kitchen, filled with more food than one person could ever consume, and felt a heaviness settle in his chest. How had he become this man? A man who fired someone without even listening. The silence of the mansion no longer felt peaceful. It felt empty. Days passed, but the note stayed with him. He carried it in his pocket, reading it again and again. Each time the words seemed heavier. Each time his chest tightened a little more. Finally, he couldn't ignore it anymore. Adrian ordered his driver to find her. It wasn't easy. Maya had disappeared quietly, moving back to a modest neighborhood far from the luxury of Adrian's world. When he finally stood outside her small home, the contrast hit him hard. The house was worn, the paint peeling, the surroundings modest, but there was something alive about it, something real. He hesitated before knocking. For a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, this simple act felt terrifying. When the door opened, Maya stood there, surprised and unsure. Her eyes widened slightly, not with anger, but with confusion. Adrian struggled to find the words. For the first time in years, he wasn't the man in control. He looked past her and saw a small boy lying on a thin mattress, his face pale but peaceful. The sight pierced something deep within him. Without thinking, Adrian stepped inside, his carefully constructed walls collapsing piece by piece. That day, everything changed. He didn't just apologize, he listened, truly listened. He learned about her struggles, her sacrifices, her silent battles. He saw the reality he had been blind to. And in that small, humble home, Adrian Voss, one of the most powerful men in the city, felt smaller than ever before, but also more human. In the weeks that followed, Adrian did something no one expected. He didn't just offer her the job back. He ensured her son received proper medical care, provided stable support, and restructured how he treated every single person who worked for him. The rules didn't disappear, but compassion found its place among them. The mansion slowly changed. It wasn't just a place of perfection anymore, it became a place of understanding. And Adrian changed too. The man who once saw a maid opening a fridge as a betrayal now saw it as a silent cry for help. Before we reach the ending, take a moment. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, and share. Stories like this remind us that sometimes understanding someone's pain can change everything. Special request: comment below kindness matters if you believe one small act of compassion can change a life. Months later, Adrian stood in his kitchen again. The same refrigerator stood before him, unchanged. But this time, when he opened it, he didn't see control or rules. He saw abundance and responsibility. He remembered the moment that had once filled him with anger, and now filled him with tears, because the truth was never about a fridge. It was about a heart that had forgotten how to feel, and a woman who reminded him what it meant to be human again.